Julian Montgomery froze in the doorway. His hands gripped the carved oak frame. His breath caught somewhere between his lungs and his throat. The wheelchair, Alice's custom pink wheelchair, sat empty against the wall of the Marlin Mansion's east wing, and on the floor, his housekeeper was doing something with his paralyzed daughter that made his blood run cold. "What?" His voice cracked. "What is this?" 14 months ago, a spring storm turned Grand Lake into a death trap. His wife, Elena, was taking Alice out on their boat for her 7th birthday. Julian was in Houston closing an oil deal. The call came at 3:47 p.m. The boat capsized. Elena drowned trying to keep Alice's head above water. Alice survived, but she didn't walk away. Severe spinal trauma. T11, L1 damage. The neurologists from Johns Hopkins were clear. His daughter would likely never walk again. Julian built a fortress around his guilt. The best specialists from Mayo Clinic, round-the-clock nursing care, state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment imported from Germany. Everything controlled, everything measured, everything safe. Alice sat in that pink wheelchair like a ghost, silent, barely present. Eyes that once danced with light now just stared at nothing. 3 weeks ago, Coretta Wells walked through his door. 26 years old, hired to help around the house, cooking, cleaning, light duties. Nothing medical, nothing specialized. But Coretta saw something no one else did. She saw a little girl, not a diagnosis, and she refused to believe it was over. For 2 weeks, while Julian traveled between Tulsa and Oklahoma City for business, Coretta worked with Alice in secret. Gentle movements, hymns sung soft and low, techniques she'd learned when her grandmother had a stroke in North Tulsa. Techniques that helped her cousin walk again after doctors said he'd never leave his hospital bed. That Tuesday afternoon, Julian came home early from a canceled meeting in Dallas. He heard something drifting from the therapy room, something he hadn't heard in 14 months. Laughter. He walked down the corridor of the Marlin Mansion, past the oil portraits and the Oklahoma limestone walls, and opened the door. What he saw stopped his heart. Before we begin, hit like, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. If you've ever watched someone believe in a miracle when everyone else had given up, this story will tear your heart wide open. Julian's $5,000 Italian shoes felt glued to the hardwood floor. Coretta looked up at him, her hands stilling on Alice's legs. The little girl sensed something shift, her smile fading, her blue eyes moving to her father. Julian's voice came out sharper than he intended, cutting through the room like glass. "What are you doing? Why is she out of her chair?" Coretta looked up from the pink therapy mat, her hands still resting gently on Alice's small legs. She was calm, but something cautious flickered in her eyes. "Mr. Montgomery, I'm just helping her stretch. She needs. You're not a physical therapist." His hands were shaking now. He could feel them trembling at his sides. "You're not a doctor. Mr. Montgomery, please just listen. Get her back in the wheelchair. Now." Coretta's jaw tightened. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Alice's face crumpled. Silent tears began sliding down her cheeks, the kind that broke something deep in Julian's chest. Coretta lifted her gently, whispering something he couldn't hear, something soft and private between them. Alice reached for Coretta, her small arms wrapping around the woman's neck. She didn't reach for him. That cut deeper than anything had in 14 months. "I need you to leave," Julian said, his voice hollow now, emptied of everything. "Pack your things." Coretta nodded slowly. She wiped her hands on her white apron, straightened her shoulders, and walked past him without another word. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor of the Marlin Mansion, fading into the silence. Julian knelt beside Alice's wheelchair. She wouldn't look at him. Her blonde hair fell forward, hiding her face, and her hands lay limp in her lap. "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here." But she turned her face away, toward the window, toward anywhere but him. "When did she stop reaching for me?" He knew the answer. He'd always known. 14 months ago, the day everything shattered. The memory came unbidden, vivid and cruel. Elena taking Alice to their lake house for the weekend, while Julian stayed in Houston for merger meetings. The Spring Hill Energy deal, $300 million, the biggest of his career. Elena had called once around noon. He was in the boardroom, slides up on the screen, 12 executives staring at projections. "Can it wait?" he'd said, not unkindly but not warmly either. She never called again. By the time his plane landed in Tulsa, Elena was gone and Alice was in emergency surgery at OU Medical Center. T11, L1 spinal trauma. Doctors speaking in careful, measured tones about realistic expectations and long-term prognosis. Julian lifted Alice from the floor earlier that day, carried her to her room, tucked her into bed. She didn't say a word. She hadn't said a word in months. That night at 2 a.m, Julian stood in his study, whiskey untouched on the desk. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't breathe. The mansion felt like a tomb. He pulled up the security footage on his laptop, scrolling back through the past 3 weeks. His finger hovered over the playback button for the therapy room camera. What has Coretta really been doing with his daughter? He pressed play. Julian watched weeks of footage unfold on the screen, the timestamp in the corner ticking forward through hours of his daughter's life he'd missed while closing deals in Tulsa and Oklahoma City. Week 1. Coretta singing old gospel hymns while Alice sat motionless in her wheelchair. His eyes on the sparrow, the melody soft and steady. Alice's expression softened, just slightly, barely perceptible, but there. Week 2. Coretta on the mat with Alice, hands moving in gentle circles along her legs, talking about her grandmother who'd had a stroke. The doctor said Grandma would never walk again either, baby girl. But she did. Then, at timestamp 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, Alice's toes flexed. Barely visible, just the slightest movement, but there. Julian rewound, watched again. His breath caught in his chest. It happened. It was real. He scrolled forward. Week 3, Alice reaching for a stuffed rabbit with shaky fingers. Coretta holding her steady, patient, never rushing. That's it, sweet girl. You're so strong. Then Julian heard it, Coretta's voice, barely above a whisper, and she was praying. Lord, the doctors say she can't, but I see her trying. And trying is where miracles begin. Please help this baby. Please. Those words pierced straight through him. Trying is where miracles begin. Julian checked the live feed. Coretta's small room over the garage, empty. Bed untouched. Did she already leave? His stomach dropped. Then he found her on the feed from Alice's bedroom. She was on the floor beside Alice's bed, wrapped in a blanket. Alice's small hand rested on Coretta's arm. She stayed. At dawn, Julian went to Alice's room. Coretta's eyes opened when he entered, immediately alert. I watched the footage, he said quietly. All of it. Coretta sat up slowly. Then you know I wasn't hurting her. I know. Silence stretched between them. I saw her toes move. I saw her smile. His voice cracked. I saw her happy. Coretta finally looked at him. My grandmother raised me after my mama passed. She had a stroke when I was 16. Doctors said she'd never walk, never talk right again. But my aunt, she was a physical therapist aide, worked with her every single day. Gentle stretches, singing prayer. 2 years later, Grandma walked me down the aisle at my high school graduation. Why didn't you tell me you knew how to do this? Because you wouldn't have let me try, Mr. Montgomery. You would have said I was overstepping. He couldn't argue. She was right. Alice needs you, Coretta said softly. Not your money. Not these doctors. You. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed on the dresser. Text from his assistant. Vivian Hartford is on her way from Dallas. ETA 90 minutes. She said it's urgent. Julian's blood went cold. His mother-in-law never showed up unannounced unless she was ready for war. 3 days later, Julian insisted on comprehensive testing at OU Medical Center in Oklahoma City. Alice was nervous in the car, her small hands gripping the armrests of her wheelchair as they loaded her into the SUV. Coretta sat in back with her, holding her hand, humming Amazing Grace soft and steady. Dr. Marcus Webb, chief of pediatric neurology, was skeptical when they arrived. We just examined her 2 months ago, Julian. I'm not sure what you expect to find. Something's changed, Julian said firmly. I need you to look again. The tests took 90 minutes, EMG scans, nerve conduction studies, muscle stimulation tests. Alice kept looking for Coretta, who stayed close, whispering encouragement each time the machines beeped or the technicians adjusted electrodes. Dr. Webb studied the monitor in silence. He removed his glasses, leaned closer to the screen, then stared at it without blinking. What is it? Julian asked, heart hammering against his ribs. Dr. Webb didn't answer immediately. He zoomed in on the scan, checked settings, ran it again. Finally, There's nerve activity in Alice's lower lumbar region. L1, L2. Julian's breath caught. What does that mean? It means. Dr. Webb looked up, confusion clear on his face. Something is responding. Faintly but measurably. It wasn't there 2 months ago. He pulled up another scan on the tablet. Muscle response in her right quadriceps. Not much, but it's there. Dr. Webb set down his tablet. Julian, I don't know how to explain this. Statistically, this shouldn't be happening. He looked at Coretta. What changed in the last month? Julian glanced at Coretta. She sat quietly, hands folded in her lap. Someone who refused to give up on her, Julian said softly. Dr. Webb studied Coretta for a long moment. What kind of therapy have you been doing? Nothing formal, sir. Just gentle movements, stretches, music, prayer. Being present. Being present, Dr. Webb repeated thoughtfully. He was quiet a moment, then nodded slowly. Whatever you're doing, don't stop. I'll monitor her progress closely. But, he paused, choosing his words carefully. This is extraordinary. Unprecedented in my 20 years of practice. That night, Julian's phone rang as he sat in his study at Marlin Mansion. Vivian Hartford's name flashed on screen. He stared at it for 3 rings before answering. I'm driving up tomorrow, she said, her voice clipped and cold as January wind. We need to discuss this woman you've hired to care for my granddaughter. Vivian. Tomorrow, Julian. 10 o'clock. Be there. The line went dead. Julian set the phone down slowly. Vivian Hartford was coming to Marlin Mansion, and she sounded ready for battle. Vivian Hartford arrived at 10 o'clock in a black Mercedes. Pearls, Chanel suit, hair perfect. She moved like old Dallas money, entitled, certain, unmovable. Julian met her at the mansion's grand entrance. Vivian. Julian. Air kiss, no warmth. You look exhausted. I've been focused on Alice. So I've heard. Her eyes scanned the opulent interior, the Oklahoma limestone, the oil portraits, the imported chandeliers. Where is this woman? If you mean Coretta, she's with Alice. Vivian's lips pressed thin. We need to talk. Now. In his study, Vivian didn't sit. I spoke with Patricia Buchanan yesterday. She mentioned you're allowing an unqualified domestic employee to conduct physical therapy on a severely injured child. Julian's jaw tightened. That's not accurate. Do you understand the liability? The danger? Vivian's voice cut like glass. This woman has no medical credentials, no training, and you're experimenting on my granddaughter. She's helping Alice. You don't know that. You're desperate, Julian, and desperate men make catastrophic mistakes. Vivian's eyes were ice. The doctors were clear. Alice will never walk. Accepting that is the responsible thing to do. The doctors saw new nerve activity. Muscle response that wasn't there before. And what happens when this woman makes a mistake? Causes a setback. Vivian's voice dropped. I'm calling our attorneys. I'll file for custody if I have to. Julian stood. You will not. Then I'll report her to Child Protective Services myself. Before Julian could respond, the study door opened. Coretta stood there, Alice in her arms. The little girl's head rested on Coretta's shoulder, blonde hair spilling over her pink shirt. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Mr. Montgomery, Coretta said quietly. Alice wanted some water and she stopped. Saw Vivian. The room went still. Vivian's eyes moved from Coretta to Alice and back. Put her down. Vivian, Julian started. Put her down. Coretta hesitated, then gently set Alice on her feet, hands on her shoulders for support. Alice wobbled, legs trembling like branches in wind. But she stood. Vivian's face drained of color. Then Alice saw her grandmother. A shy smile crossed her face. Grammy. The word hung in the air like something impossible. Alice lifted her arms toward Vivian. Actually lifted them, with strength, with intention. Vivian stared. Her mouth opened. No words came. Go ahead, Coretta said softly. She wants you. Vivian took one step forward, then another. Alice reached higher, fingers stretching. And Vivian Hartford, who buried her only daughter 14 months ago in a grave overlooking White Rock Lake, felt her eyes burn with tears she hadn't allowed herself to cry. She turned and walked out without a word. Julian stood frozen. Coretta lifted Alice back into her arms, whispering something soft. The little girl laid her head back on Coretta's shoulder. 10 minutes later, Julian found Vivian in the hallway, staring at a portrait of Elena. His wife smiled down from the canvas in her white summer dress, painted 2 years before the accident. Vivian's hand rested on the wall beside the frame. Her shoulders were shaking. Julian didn't know if she was calling her lawyers, or if something inside her had finally shifted. Julian didn't sleep. He kept his phone close on the nightstand, waiting for lawyers, for CPS, for everything to fall apart. But the call never came. Morning arrived slow and gray. He found Coretta in the therapy room with Alice. Gentle stretches, singing softly. "That's it, baby girl. Just a little more." Alice's leg lifted slightly, her face concentrated with effort. "I see you, sweet girl. You're doing so good." Julian stood in the doorway. Alice noticed him first. "Daddy, look." She flexed her toes. Barely visible, but unmistakable. "I see, sweetheart." Julian's voice cracked. "That's amazing." Coretta glanced up. Their eyes met briefly before she looked away. The morning passed quietly. Too quietly. Coretta kept to herself, made breakfast, tidied the kitchen, stayed professional and distant in a way that felt deliberate. At 2 in the afternoon, Vivian finally called. Julian braced himself, hand tight around the phone. "I spoke with Richard Townsend this morning," Vivian said. Richard was the family attorney. Julian's stomach dropped. Long pause. "I told him to stand down." Julian blinked. "What?" "I'm not calling anyone. I'm not filing anything." Her voice was quieter than he'd ever heard it. "What I saw yesterday, I can't unsee it. That was Elena's daughter reaching for me. Moving. Smiling. Relief flooded through him like cool water. "Thank you, Vivian. Don't thank me yet. But I won't be the one who stops this." She paused, and he heard something shift in her tone. "That woman, Coretta, she loves Alice. I see it." After hanging up, Julian found Coretta folding laundry in Alice's room, each small shirt and pair of pants placed carefully in neat stacks. "Vivian's not going to interfere," he said. Coretta paused, hands resting on a pink sweater. "That's good. Coretta, I need you to know, what you're doing for Alice means everything." She looked at him then. Really looked. "She's not finished fighting, Mr. Montgomery. And neither am I." Something unspoken passed between them. Understanding, maybe, or trust beginning to take root where fear had been. Then Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. Text from an unknown number. "This is Dr. Rachel Foster, Children's Hospital Foundation. I heard about Alice Montgomery's case. We need to discuss documentation and protocol. Call me." Julian stared at the screen. His chest tightened. Just when they thought they were safe, new questions emerged. Was this help or another threat? 5 days later, Julian returned from a morning meeting in Tulsa. The mansion felt wrong. Too quiet. "Coretta," he called. Nothing. He checked the kitchen, therapy room, her room over the garage. Empty. Her clothes were gone. Her Bible, her bag, everything. On the kitchen counter, a handwritten note. "Mr. Montgomery, your mother-in-law was right to be concerned. My presence is causing conflict in your family, and that's the last thing Alice needs. Please don't stop working with her, she's so close. The exercises are in the blue folder in the therapy room. Dr. Webb can guide you. Thank you for letting me be part of her life, even for a little while. Coretta." Julian's hands shook. "No." He found Alice in the therapy room, wheelchair by the window. Tears streamed down her face silently. Julian knelt beside her. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Alice looked at him with swollen eyes. "Where's Miss Coretta?" Julian froze. A full sentence. The first full sentence Alice had spoken since the accident. "Where's Miss Coretta?" Alice said again, voice rising, desperate and breaking. Julian pulled her close, his own tears falling into her blonde hair. "I don't know, baby. I don't know." But as he held his daughter, hearing her voice for the first time in 14 months, something crystallized inside him. Vivian's concerns didn't matter. The doctor's protocols didn't matter. His pride, his control, his fear, none of it mattered. What mattered was the woman who gave his daughter her voice back. And he let her walk away. "Stay right here, okay?" He wiped Alice's tears with his thumbs. "I'm going to fix this. You're bringing her back?" Hope cracked through Alice's voice like sunlight through storm clouds. "I'm going to try." Julian grabbed his keys from the study. He didn't know Coretta's exact address, but he knew she was from North Tulsa. He'd find her. He had to. He ran to the garage, fired up the Range Rover, and tore down the long driveway of Marlin Mansion. The sky was darkening to the west, storm clouds gathering over the prairie. Thunder rumbled in the distance. Julian pressed the accelerator harder, heading south on Highway 77 toward Tulsa. He was going to bring her home. Julian drove like a man possessed. His assistant had sent Coretta's address. North Tulsa, modest neighborhood near Greenwood, small house with a front porch and white paint peeling at the corners. Rain started, a light at first, then heavy. Oklahoma spring storm, thunder rolling across the plains like timpani drums. He found the house, pulled up to the curb, ran through the rain without thinking, knocked hard on the door. Coretta opened it, eyes red from crying. "Mr. Montgomery? My daughter spoke today." Julian's voice broke completely. For the first time in 14 months. She said a full sentence. Coretta's hand rose to her mouth. She asked where you were. Tears streamed down Julian's face, mixing with rain. "You gave her voice back, Coretta. You gave her hope. And I let you leave. Your mother-in-law. I don't care what Vivian thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks." He shook his head, water dripping from his hair. "Alice needs you. I need you. Mr. Montgomery. Please." His voice cracked completely, raw and exposed. "Come back. Not as staff. As family. As the person who saw my daughter when I'd stopped looking." Coretta's tears spilled over. She really spoke. Julian nodded, unable to form words. She looked at him, this powerful man standing on her porch in the rain, suit soaked through, broken open, finally seeing clearly what had been in front of him all along. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll come back." Julian exhaled, relief flooding through him. "Thank you. But Mr. Montgomery." "Julian. Please." "Julian." She said his name carefully, testing it. "I need you to understand something. This isn't about techniques or therapy. It's about love. It's about showing up every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." "I know." And he did. For the first time in 14 months, he truly understood. They drove back to Ponca City together, through sheets of rain and lightning splitting the sky. Alice was waiting in the therapy room when they arrived, her small face pressed against the window. When she saw Coretta step out of the car, her entire face lit up. "Miss Coretta!" The words rang out clear as bells. Coretta ran to her, gathered her up, held her close. Alice wrapped her arms around Coretta's neck and didn't let go. Julian stood in the doorway watching them, feeling something shift inside his chest. Guilt making room for hope, control surrendering to trust. 5 months later, on a Thursday morning, everything changed forever. Marlin Mansion therapy room. Dr. Webb and a physical therapist from OU Medical watching from chairs against the wall. Julian stood by the window, hands clasped like prayer. Vivian Hartford stood in the doorway, silent and still. Alice stood on the pink mat. Coretta's hands supported her lightly at the waist. "You ready, baby girl?" Coretta whispered. Alice nodded, jaw set with determination that reminded Julian of Elena. Coretta let go. Alice took 1 step. Wobbled. 2 steps. 3. 4. 5. 6 unassisted steps before her legs trembled and Julian caught her. They both sobbed, father and daughter holding each other, 14 months of grief and fear pouring out in waves neither could control. Julian buried his face in Alice's hair, feeling her small body shake with emotion, feeling her arms wrapped tight around his neck. "I did it, Daddy," Alice whispered. "I did it." "You did, sweetheart. You did." Dr. Webb wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. 23 years in pediatric neurology, he said, voice hoarse and breaking. "I have never seen anything like this." The physical therapist was crying too, not bothering to hide it. Vivian stepped forward, knelt beside Julian and Alice. "Elena would be so proud," she whispered, touching Alice's blonde hair with trembling fingers. So proud." Julian looked up at Coretta. She stood back, tears streaming down her face, hands over her heart. "Come here," he said. Coretta shook her head. "This is your moment." "No." Julian reached out his hand. "This is ours." Coretta came forward, knelt beside them. Alice reached for her, pulled her into the embrace. The 4 of them stayed there on the pink therapy mat, Julian, Alice, Coretta, and Vivian, holding each other while Dr. Webb and the therapist watched in respectful silence. Julian held Alice close and whispered the first real prayer he'd said since losing Elena. "Thank you, God. Thank you." Coretta's hand found his shoulder. Squeezed gently. Outside the window, sunlight broke through Oklahoma clouds, casting gold across the Marlin Mansion gardens. Alice pulled back, looked at her father with shining eyes. "Can I try again?" Julian laughed through his tears. "You can try as many times as you want, sweetheart." She stood again, Coretta's hands barely touching her waist. This time she took 8 steps before needing support. Dr. Webb was already on his phone, calling colleagues, documenting what he was witnessing. Vivian sat back on her heels, watching her granddaughter walk, and smiled for the first time since Elena died. 11 months later, something even more extraordinary was about to happen. BOK Center, Tulsa, Oklahoma. Montgomery Hope Foundation launch event. The banner stretched across the stage read, "Funding unconventional rehabilitation for children with spinal injuries." Coretta Wells, program director, stood at the podium. Alice beside her. Standing. No wheelchair. No assistance. Vivian Hartford sat in the front row, dabbing her eyes with a folded handkerchief. Julian took the stage. 19 months ago, I thought my daughter's future was over. I thought accepting her limitations was the responsible thing to do. His voice thick with emotion. I was wrong. The crowd was silent, listening. Hope isn't reckless. Giving up is. And sometimes the person who can help the most is the one willing to believe when everyone else has stopped. Thunderous applause filled the arena. People rose to their feet. Alice waved shyly from the stage, and the applause grew louder. That evening, back at Marlin Mansion, golden hour light filtered through the tall windows, painting everything amber and soft. Alice actually ran, through the therapy room, chasing a soccer ball. Her blonde hair flew behind her. She was laughing, pure joy spilling out of her like music. Coretta sat on the mat, watching with quiet pride. Julian joined her, lowering himself to sit beside her on the floor. "You gave her life back," he said softly. "No," Coretta smiled. "She was always fighting. I just refused to let her fight alone." The wheelchair sat folded in the corner, covered with a white sheet. Donated to another family last month. No longer needed. Alice ran to Julian, climbed into his lap breathless and warm. "Daddy, can Miss Coretta read me a story?" "Of course, sweetheart." "The one about the mustard seed," Alice added. Coretta smiled. "I think I can do that." They moved to Alice's bedroom, where the three of them settled on the bed, Alice between them, her small body pressed against Julian's side. Coretta opened the worn Bible she'd brought from her grandmother's house, the pages thin and marked with years of reading. "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed," Coretta read, her voice soft and steady, "you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." Alice's eyes grew heavy, her breathing slowing. Julian watched his daughter drift toward sleep, feeling her weight against him, feeling her alive and whole. As evening light bathed the historic Marlin Mansion, Julian realized something profound. He'd come home that day expecting to find his daughter trapped in her limitations. Instead, he'd found the woman who would free them both, not through medicine alone, but through something doctors couldn't prescribe: love, presence, unshakable faith, and the quiet courage to believe that miracles still happen when someone refuses to give up. Outside, Oklahoma wind whispered through the mansion gardens. Inside, a family rebuilt, redeemed, and finally whole began another chapter. Alice slept peacefully between them, and Julian reached across her, found Coretta's hand, and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss these powerful stories of faith and hope.